What's up guys, my name is Nadestorms, and in this video I'll show you everything you need to know about the Dark and Darker marketplace. Table of contents will be on screen if you want to skip to a part that is relevant for you. So first things first, the marketplace filters. Now this is very basic. There are obviously filters across the top. You can search for a specific item, say rapier. And let's say I want to buy a blue rapier. We can search here. But there are also some more intricate filters. For example, static attribute will actually list what static attribute we want to look at. So for example, weapon damage, we can now see it listed. So this rapier has 27 weapon damage, and we can sort that way to try to find exactly what we're looking for. This really mostly applies to weapons because gear will have very similar static attributes for the rarity. Another thing you can do with the filters, instead of looking through a sea of items, we can actually look for a specific slot of gear, but more specifically we could look for a class. So let's say Warlock, we'll go ahead and say headpiece. So now we can actually sort by headpieces that Warlocks can wear. And let's say we want to try to find a piece with true magical damage. Now we have it sorted, we can look through and find what makes sense for us. What makes an item valuable? So one thing primarily with items, and I have these Oculus hoods here for example, as we go up the rarities we'll see a change in the stat. In this case it's magical healing from 3 to 4 to 5. Next we want to look at the rolls. So for example, green will have 1, this is +1 vigor. The blue will have 2 rolls, this is +2 dexterity, +2 agility, and purple will have 3. Generally speaking, the rolls are going to heavily dictate the price of an item in a specific rarity. Depending on the meta, depending on the patch, the higher rarity item, especially this patch, will typically be more valuable than a lower rarity. So for example, this purple would generally be more valuable than this blue. However, depending on the rolls, that is not always the case. In fact, this blue is actually more valuable because of the agility. If I look at Oculus Hood, okay, we'll look at just blue with agility. We can see the first +2 agility is 250 gold. And if we look at a purple with just any rolls on it, we're going to get that for 200 gold. So generally speaking, sometimes the base stat, for example 4 to 5 magical healing, may outweigh the other stat. However, 2 agility equals 2 move speed. Move speed's good, most valuable stat in every game, period. Don't fight me on that. Another example is trying to find exactly, based on the item, what rolls would make sense. So if we're actually searching for a specific item, if we hit the random attribute, we're actually only going to see rolls that can be applied to this item. Commonly, Warlocks will not wear specific knowledge pieces. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, but you'll try to squeeze out knowledge on any pieces you can as a random attribute. So if we see that, the price will go way up when we start looking for knowledge. Then if we get even more specific, let's say knowledge and true magical damage, we can see there's only one on the market and it's 1,000 gold. So how do we find what roles are important? So one thing to consider, and I'll just refresh my marketplace. One thing to consider is not only the class and what stats they value, but also what stats they don't necessarily get in their default gear. For example, Warlock, you're not really getting knowledge in your gloves because you want magical healing. Same with your headgear. Your occultist hood does not have knowledge. So those are some areas we want to squeak out some knowledge on some other roles. Also agility, for example. You can see like this occultist hood, 2 agility, getting able to squeeze that out in a different item is very helpful to try to offset some of the move speed penalty from other gear. For example, let's say, okay, I found some boots that have additional move speed. So if I actually look at additional move speed, we'll search. Now if I click on slots, I can see exactly what slots that random attribute can roll on. So we see here, boots are a great example where the only spot you can get move speed bonuses other than just stacking agility rolls is on your feet. So boots with additional move speed are generally going to be very valuable. Just to solidify that point, if I look at occultist boots with additional move speed, We can see here in this random attribute what the move speed roll is. But for example, additional move speed on Oculus boots, we see minimum 170 for blues, and these are all 3 additional move speed. It can roll up to 5, and you can find that out just kind of by looking through and seeing, okay, now we see some 5s. Obviously, those are going to be more expensive. Another great example is DPS characters, things like Rogue, Ranger, Wizard, Warlock, any of these characters that want to stack as much damage, magical power, physical power, etc. So we could look, for example, at additional magical damage, and then if we want to look at a particular slot, we can see it's actually only available on 4 slots. So we can get it on the ring, necklace, head, and back. They actually changed this wipe, only 1 additional damage roll on ring. So in this case, you would actually want a higher rarity ring to get a higher base stat. So for example, if we're going to look at additional magic damage, and you'll see these rings are cheaper because they're an off roll base, meaning, you know, dexterity, typically if you're building magic damage, you don't really care about dexterity. There obviously are exceptions, but you get my point. If we start to go a little further, we start to see like some agility bases, big, and I would assume that knowledge is the ring of wisdom is going to be the highest price. Yeah, we can see here. Again, that's because the base fits the magic damage. That's another great way to begin to understand what items might be valuable. For example, true physical damage. If we want to search for that, we can actually see the slot is hands, neck, back, and ring. So now we can start to kind of understand what items might be valuable. And again, if we see, hey, what are the cheapest hand items with additional damage? It's these, because these have a magic resist roll instead of a base stat. And then if we want to look at specific class, like Rogue, you can see these higher rarities because it's more strength. These, for example, are very expensive because they have 3 rolls that all work together. There's no dead rolls on them, etc. These make sense. All 3 of these stats are valuable to someone who would buy these. And then lastly, we'll look at an example of tank classes. So let's look at fighter, at bucklers. Let's just look at more specifically, you know, we have purple buckler. We brought it out of the raid. We see, damn, this is only worth 70 gold. Well, we see these are all off rolls, meaning someone might buy it just for the sake of the armor rating on a purple buckler compared to, let's see, this is 26 compared to a green being 21. Great. However, we want to look at, okay, what could we get on a buckler in the future? What that would be valuable. So we can kind of look through the rolls. We see some of these. There are dead rolls, for example, buff duration, debuff duration, magical healing, interaction speed, etc. But at added armor rating, for example, we'll see the price goes way up, again, because this is a roll that is on brand for the item. And typically, if someone is trying to be as tanky as possible, they're going to squeeze out as many armor rating rolls in their gear as possible to get a mix of the lightest gear they can with also the tankiest. What price should I list this item for? I do see a lot of nonsense market listings. In fact, you could say I even have some, considering some of these are a day or 2 old. Again, the meta is always changing, so these prices are dynamic. Some of these are very niche pieces that only specific classes might need. So for example, if a cleric is looking for max health plate pants with memcap, they need to squeeze memcap for whatever reason. Maybe they're playing 10 spell cleric, etc. This is a piece that is high value there, but there's not a ton of play rate. So you can think of things like a purple rapier, for example, heavily used, multiple classes use it. It's going to sell very quickly, whereas specific rolled higher end gear might take a bit longer to sell. It's also dependent on what the meta is, what people are using. So for example, let's say I just got out of raid with this splendid cloak. First thing you want to do is think about the base stats. So in this case, Will, who's a good Will user, and then thinking of those classes that would potentially buy a Will cloak. What other roles might make this valuable? So the very obvious one in this case, and that's why I chose this example, is the max health. So every class likes max health. It's a great role on items in the current meta. Action speed, not terribly important to a spellcaster. Action speed is attack speed for those who are unaware, and then it has luck, which is just essentially a for fun or luxury role. So if I want to look at Splendid Cloak, Epic, so we can get an idea of what just a base 3-wheel cloak would go for. But then we want to add in this max health. And we can start to see what price those might be listed at. And we can see under this random attribute, this one right here is actually the same as mine with 3 max health. And then the next one from 165 to 189. Then you can choose to list it for whatever price makes sense for you. If you want to put it in between and don't mind waiting a little bit, you can do that. Additionally, again, thinking of that theme of, hey, what makes an item valuable? Thinking conceptually, okay, what would make this piece more valuable, right? Common example, additional magic damage. We can only roll it on 4 slots, back, ring, necklace, and head for magic damage. So that would be an example of what makes this cloak more valuable. So then you can kind of start to fundamentally understand what would make these items more valuable, and you can start to gauge, hey, what should I bring out of a raid?